Cells, the building blocks of life. In this lesson, you will use evidence about the characteristics of organisms to explain that all living things are made up of cells.
Objective.
Hi, I'm Brad. Whenever you take a walk outside, you're probably able to identify living and non-living things very easily. You may pass by trees or a person walking a dog. You may walk past big rocks or trek on a dirt trail. But have you ever wondered what separates living things from non-living things? Life scientists actually explore the characteristics of living things every day. Take my job, for instance. As a microbiologist for OSHA, my job requires me to work with microorganisms such as bacteria and fungi. Microorganisms are living things that humans can see only with a microscope. I generally study samples that are easy to identify as living things, but sometimes I get samples that at first glance may seem non-living. For example, just last week, I worked with a type of fungus I've never seen before. It was hard to the touch, gray in color, and looked a lot like a rock. It didn't move on its own, also like a rock. Yet the fungus was alive, and we all know that rocks are not. So what are the differences between living and non-living things? In this lesson, you'll explore these differences and learn about the basic functions of life.
These sentences describe characteristics of squirrels. What? Squirrels? What? Which of them is not true about rocks? So, squirrels' bodies contain cells. That is not true of rocks. Rocks' bodies do not contain cells. The squirrel is a natural part of the forest. Rocks are also a natural part of the forest, so that is not correct. The squirrel interacts with the environment. Rocks somewhat interact with the environment. The squirrel can change size over time. Rocks can change size. They usually get smaller with wear and tear from natures. In this statement, true or false? Humans use special body parts for functions such as breathing and breaking down food. Some living things, such as bacteria, are too small to perform these functions. That is false. If it is a living thing, it needs to consume food, right? Somehow? All right.
Living and non-living things.
Organisms. Organism, an individual living thing. Organism. Characteristic, a feature used to identify a person or thing. Characteristic.
In science, the term living things includes not only organisms that are currently alive, but also those that were once alive. For example, both a sprouting seed in a vegetable garden and a 200 million year old dinosaur fossil meet the criteria for being living things. All living things have certain characteristics in common with each other. A characteristic is a feature or a quality that's typical of a person or thing. Here are some characteristics of life that all living things possess. Use of energy, disposal of waste, growth and development, senses and responses to stimuli, protection from changes in the environment, reproduction, a defined boundary that gives the organism its shape, internal organization, which helps organisms to carry out basic functions, one or more cells.
Stimuli. The plural is stimuli, stimulus, which is anything that causes a reaction in the body. Stimulus, not just a check. Cells. The cell is the smallest functional building block of an organism. Cell. This activity is called classifying living and non-living things. In this activity, you will conduct a short research project to compare the characteristics of 4 different things: bacteria, algae, a wristwatch, and fire. Fill in the table. Oh, if you are unfamiliar with any of these things on the list, research what they are using a credible website. During your research, note whether each thing is living or non-living. Fill in the table using credible sources and your own experiences and past observations. If you are not sure what one of the characteristics means, look it up in a credible website. Uses energy. Does bacteria use energy? Yes. Does it get rid of waste? Yes. Does it grow and develop? Yes. Can it sense and respond to stimuli? Yes. Has ways to protect itself from changes in the environment? Yes. Does it reproduce? Yes. Does it have a defined boundary? Yes. Has an internal organization that helps it carry out basic functions? Yes. Is made up of one or more cells? Does algae use energy? Yes. Does it get rid of waste? Yes. Does it grow and develop? Yes. Sense and respond to stimuli? Yes. Ways to protect itself from changes in the environment? Yes. Does it reproduce? Yes. Has a defined boundary? Yes. Has an internal organization that helps it carry out basic functions? Yes. Is made up of one or more cells? Yes. A wristwatch. Does it use energy? Yes. Does it get rid of waste? No. Does it grow and develop? No. Can it sense and respond to stimuli? Ooh, that's a tough one. So we might be tempted to overthink that one. A typical watch cannot. A smartwatch may respond to the stimuli of a drastic fall, a rapid fall. Does it have ways to protect itself from changes in the environment? No. Sorry, no. Does it reproduce? No. Does it have a defined boundary? Yes. Has an internal organization that helps it carry out basic functions? Yes. Is it made up of more than one cell? No.
Living and non-living things share some characteristics of life. For example, the 4 items from the activity, bacteria,
Unicellular organisms that sometimes have cell walls but do not have organelles and an organized nucleus. Bacteria. Unicellular. Think of like a unicycle, one cell.
algae, the wristwatch, and fire all use energy. While non-living things may have some of the characteristics of living things, only living things have all of the characteristics of life. Let's look at the characteristics of life by identifying them in something very familiar to us: humans. Use of energy. We have all experienced a rumbling stomach right before a meal, or if we haven't eaten for a long time. This rumbling is the body's way of saying that it's low on energy. We obtain energy by eating food. Energy is a basic need for all living things. All bodily functions such as breathing, movement, and reproduction require energy. Disposal of waste. The word waste may remind you of trash cans or the city dump. Similar to the waste products we throw into trash cans, our bodies also produce waste, and we occasionally need to take out the trash. We release liquid and solid waste from the food we eat. These waste products are urine and feces. We also produce waste when we breathe. We breathe in oxygen, which the body needs. But when we breathe out, we release carbon dioxide, which is a waste product. Our sweat also contains waste products. A defined boundary that gives the organism its shape. The word boundary means barrier. The fence around the local park and a border on a map are examples of boundaries. Think of boundaries as outlines. Boundaries define the shapes of things. Skin is the body's boundary. Just as a fence outlines the boundary of a park, skin outlines the boundary of a body. All living things have boundaries that outline their shapes. One or more cells. The word cell is used to refer to many non-living things such as a cell phone or a cell in a battery, but the cells found in non-living things are different from cells in living things. A cell is the smallest functional unit of life. Some organisms contain only one cell. Scientists call these organisms unicellular organisms. Bacteria and amoebas are unicellular organisms. Other organisms, such as humans and animals, are more complex and are made of many cells. Organisms made up of many cells are multicellular organisms. While scientists don't know exactly how many cells make up the average human body, they estimate that the number is around 37 trillion.
Wow.
Internal organization that helps carry out basic functions. Take a look around. Notice that no two people look the same. They have different hair color and skin color. Some people are tall, while some are short. Although we are different on the outside, we all have the same types of cells and organs. So we are actually similar on the inside. Multicellular organisms, such as humans, have many types of cells. All cells have different functions. The function of a cell depends on its type. For example, cardiac cells perform functions of the heart. Together, groups of similar cells form tissues. Tissues form organs, and organs form organ systems. So, groups of specific cardiac cells make up cardiac tissue. Cardiac tissue then comes together to form the heart, which is a part of the cardiovascular system. Simple organisms do not have tissues and systems, but all living things have internal organizations that help carry out various functions such as breathing and digesting food.
Which word refers to the smallest functional unit of a living thing? A cell. Yay!
Growth and development. Humans don't stay small for long. We grow and develop over time. In fact, we shoot up inches per year when we are young. But growing includes more than just increases in height and weight. Our individual cells continue to grow and develop throughout our lives. We also grow new cells. The new cells replace dead or dying cells in the body. Like all living things, cells age and eventually die. For example, through cell growth and the formation of new cells, adult humans replace their skeletons every 10 years. Like humans, All living things grow and develop during their lifespan. Senses and responses to stimuli. Humans have 5 main senses: seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and touching. We use the senses to collect information from our environment as well as from inside our bodies. Anything that causes a response from the body is a stimulus. We have specific sense organs that respond to stimuli. These sense organs are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. They contain nerves that help the body detect stimuli. Sense organs work with the brain to respond to stimuli. For example, skin contains nerves that help us feel external stimuli. Our hands feel cold if we hold ice cubes. In this instance, the ice cubes are the stimulus, while the hand feeling cold is the body's response. Other nerves inside the body help us feel internal changes, such as the pain of a headache or an upset stomach. Protection from changes in the environment. Walking outside on a cold day doesn't cause a body to instantly become as cold as the air. Likewise, accidentally touching a hot pan doesn't make the entire body heat up. In both situations, the body maintains the same temperature. Under normal conditions, humans maintain a consistent internal body temperature of about 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Even if external temperatures change, our bodies have the ability to maintain a stable internal temperature. The ability to maintain a stable internal condition is homeostasis. We have various internal mechanisms.
Homeostasis, the ability to stabilize internal conditions when surrounded by changing external conditions. So it gets hot outside, we can sweat to help us cool off. When it's cold, we can bundle up to warm up.
To help maintain homeostasis. For example, in the cold, we shiver to warm up, and when it's too hot, we sweat to cool down. Both mechanisms help maintain the body's internal temperature. Reproduction. Fires grow and spread. Rocks break apart into smaller rocks. In these ways, fires and rocks are non-living things that seem to create new things or reproduce. Reproduction means to make a copy of something. Reproduction in humans and other living things also involves making copies of the parents. But there is one important difference between reproduction in non-living things and living things. Living organisms reproduce and pass down genetic or hereditary traits to their offspring. Genes are the units of heredity. They carry information about physical and other traits from parents to offspring. Genetic material is the substance that carries genes in all organisms. We may say that someone has his mother's eyes or her father's smile. These traits come to us because parents pass some of their characteristics to their children through the process of reproduction.
The directions say, watch this video that shows the leaves of a Mimosa pudica plant. What characteristics of life does the video show? Name 2 examples of how humans exhibit this characteristic of life. And then remember, you have an assignment that wants you to identify 3 characteristics of yourself, but not about life, but about how you are as a quality human being. That was it. Try it again. See if you notice. Whoop. Whoop. So what characteristics do we see? The video shows the plant reacting to external stimuli. The human is touching it. That's outside of the plant, and stimulus is the physical touch. Humans also react to many types of external stimuli. If someone touches us when we're not expecting it, we jump. If we put a hand on something hot, we snatch it away. When it's cold outside, our bodies shiver and our skin turns cold. When we walk into the sunlight after being in the shade, we tend to close our eyes or squint.
Cellular organisms. Scientists classify life on Earth into two categories.
Sorry, I had a hiccup. I'm going to play that again.
Cellular organisms. Scientists classify life on Earth into two categories: unicellular and multicellular organisms. Today, both unicellular and multicellular organisms exist, but this was not always the case. Early in the history of life on Earth, only single-celled or unicellular organisms existed. These unicellular organisms, such as bacteria and amoebas, are some of the simplest forms of life. Later on, various changes on Earth gave rise to more complex multicellular organisms. But these complex organisms should have some connection with the simple unicellular organisms. Let's see what caused these simple, single-celled organisms to pave the way for complex multicellular organisms.
Activity. Watch this video about multicellular life, then answer the questions that follow. What he said there was kind of like if you have a soda that's dark in color, right? And you have maybe some melted ice on top, and so that's where the sun gets through. But when it's dark, the sun doesn't get through. So we know it's an animal, not a plant, because plants make their own food. They have to have sunlight to do that. Therefore, it's got to be an animal to live in the darkness. The ice melted. So if you took your soda and you dumped in a bunch more ice, and it initially went all the way down to the bottom because it plunged in, and then as it came back out, as it came back up to the surface, ice floats. This ice wasn't necessarily floated, but the warm water and melted ice rose the water level, the sea level, and as it when it was down below and melted, the oxygen that was in the ice got released, and all those animals that were down there now rose up in this rising water. That's kind of neat.
Before the glacier.
Why did the video use the word evolve? Evolve describes the natural processes that cause organisms to develop and diversify. Like the unicellular organisms that came from before them, multicellular organisms developed when conditions were ideal for their development. The rise of multicellular organisms allowed the Earth to develop or evolve a wide range of life forms.
Basic life functions. As the video explained, changes in Earth's climate and environment cause the change from unicellular to complex multicellular organisms. Recall that humans are multicellular organisms. We all perform basic body functions such as using energy and developing. These functions are not unique to humans. All organisms, multicellular or unicellular, perform these basic life functions, but the ways different organisms perform these functions differ. Let's look at some of the basic functions of life using an amoeba, a unicellular organism, and a flowering plant, a a multicellular organism as examples. Nutrition. All organisms need energy to perform their body functions. To scientists, nutrition is the process of obtaining food. Some organisms make their own energy. Plants, as shown in the image on the left, make their own food through photosynthesis. They use carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight to make sugar, glucose, and release oxygen. Other organisms, such as humans and animals, must consume food to obtain energy. For example, an amoeba, shown on the right, takes in food by surrounding it and bringing the food inside the cell. Humans eat food to obtain energy. Growth. Growth is the process of getting taller, bigger, and mature. All organisms undergo growth and change throughout their entire lives, even if their bodies stop growing physically larger. Unicellular organisms grow in size until they can no longer absorb enough nutrients to carry out all their functions. Every cell has a limit to how big it can grow, so amoebas grow until they can't efficiently perform all their cellular functions. The genes of multicellular organisms determine how large they can grow. Some plants grow taller throughout their entire lives. However, humans stop growing taller once they reach adulthood. Respiration. The word respiration may bring to mind the idea of taking a deep breath. Not all organisms have lungs, as humans do, but all organisms undergo respiration. Respiration is the process of obtaining energy from food. This process requires oxygen. Plants make their own food from sunlight, while an amoeba must take in food from its environment. Both organisms use respiration to bring in the oxygen needed to turn food into energy. Reproduction. Reproduction is the process of producing offspring. Both unicellular and multicellular organisms reproduce, but in different ways. Some types of amoebas reproduce through a process called binary fission. In binary fission, a cell divides into two cells. These two new cells have the same genes, which makes them identical. In amoebas, there is only one parent to pass down genes to the new cells. In contrast to amoebas, flowering plants use pollination to reproduce. As pollen from one flower fertilizes a flower on a different plant, the second plant produces seeds that grow into new offspring. Because two plants are involved in this process, the offspring inherits genes from both parents. Therefore, the offspring is genetically different from either parent. Regulation. Regulation is the process of adjusting to changing conditions. For example, amoebas prefer dim light. They avoid bright light and darkness. If an amoeba comes across an area under strong light, it moves away from it. Likewise, amoebas also avoid darkness. So, amoebas can regulate their movements based on the intensity of light. Plants can also regulate various mechanisms. The root cells control the amount of water in a plant's cells. The root cells absorb water from the soil when the rest of the plant needs water for photosynthesis. Releasing waste. Organisms release waste through the process of excretion. These wastes include the byproducts of breaking down food and other toxic substances. Amoebas release waste through their cell membranes or small structures called contractile vacuoles. Plants release waste products through their leaves.
The two diagrams show a hydra, which is a multicellular organism, and a paramecium, a single-celled organism, performing a basic life function. What life function do these images show? If you said reproduction, you'd be correct. Microorganisms. Microorganisms are a single-celled or multicellular organism that can be seen only under a microscope. Virus. A microscopic agent that contains genetic material and reproduces inside the host cell of another organism. Good times.
Careers in science. Virologist. A microbiologist is a scientist who studies microorganisms, which can be unicellular or multicellular. Bacteria, fungi, and viruses are types of microorganisms. Viruses are microscopic agents that fall in a gray area between living and non-living things. Scientists call microorganisms and other agents that cause disease pathogens. Microbiologists who specialize in the study of such pathogens are medical microbiologists. A virologist is a medical microbiologist who specifically studies viruses and how they affect living things.
We've heard a lot about that recently, haven't we? Probably more than we'd like to. But glad
Viruses
somebody's
cause
studying
some common illnesses such as the common cold and flu. Virologists study ways to fight viral illnesses. They research how viruses reproduce. Virologists also develop vaccines against viral illnesses. For example, they create flu vaccines. They also develop medications that can treat lifelong viral infections, such as infections caused by the chickenpox virus.
I've had that.
Viruses are unique infectious agents that possess some characteristics of living things, but they also have characteristics of non-living things. For this reason, scientists cannot classify them as true living things. Let's explore the characteristics of viruses. Viruses have some characteristics of living things. They have genetic material that carries information on producing more viruses. They reproduce in cells of other organisms to create more viruses. They have internal organization, including genetic material and various proteins. They can adapt to their environment to protect themselves from being destroyed by the cells they infect. But viruses lack some important characteristics of life. They lack cells and do not respire and excrete waste. They can reproduce only inside the cells of living organisms. Some viruses have DNA, but others have a different type of genetic material known as RNA. All living things use both DNA and RNA. They do not use energy. These characteristics show us that viruses don't seem like living things when they are on their own, but when they invade cells of a living organism, they start showing characteristics of life. They use the cell's energy and internal organization to replicate or reproduce. They have the ability to greatly change the organism they infect. All viruses are pathogens because they damage the cells of living things. But exposure to viruses has also benefited humans. Watch the video on the next screen to learn how viruses and microorganisms help humans.
You might remember War of the Worlds, in which germs came to the rescue. When humans couldn't save themselves, it was germs who killed the alien invaders. And in some ways, that's not too far off.
Oops. Sorry about that.
Humans couldn't save themselves, it was germs who killed the alien invaders. And in some ways, that's not too far off.
For starters, they help us eat. Without all the bacteria in our guts, we wouldn't be able to digest the nutrients in a lot of our favorite foods.
They boost our immune system. All these foreign bodies living inside of our bodies, they balance out. The good ones battle with the bad ones, keeping the microbes that might harm us in check.
And it's a good thing most bugs are good, because there are 100 trillion, that's trillion with a T, microbial cells in our bodies, outnumbering human cells 10 to 1.
So there's more of them in you than there is you in you. Courtney Humphries is a science writer. She's written for Harvard Medical School. She says that this has scientists thinking of the human body as a kind of super organism.
When you're talking about whether we're healthy or not, it's not just our bodies as separate individual things and then the bacteria. It's that we're functioning together as an organism.
So now dirt is our friend. There's even something you could call a dirt movement. Doctors know kids exposed to common germs develop healthier immune systems.
That's the dirty little secret of the booming hand sanitizer business. I'm just saying. Good thing the aliens in War of the Worlds didn't have hand sanitizer.
And listen to this, the food industry has an appetite for germs. It puts bacteria into food and calls it probiotics. Creepy crawlies that are good for you.
Even viruses, those nasty little cell hijackers, have helped us. Our genes, which evolved over billions of years, have been shaped in part by the viruses around us.
Researchers say genes that control placenta growth in our immune system appear to be viral in origin. Nobel Prize winner Philip Sharp says as much as 50%, half, of our DNA was shaped by viruses.
And the same mechanism that makes the flu so infectious can help us as well. Scientists have learned to reprogram viruses so that they attack enemy cells in our bodies and leave the rest of us unharmed.
Today you can buy many antibacterial cleaning products that weren't available in the past. Do you think the increased use of these products raises any concerns? Explain why or why not, using evidence from the video. Yes, there is reason for concern. The video explains that children exposed to normal germs in the environment, such as bacteria, seem to have healthier immune systems. Using a lot of antibacterial cleaning products might decrease children's exposure to these germs. This may lead to an increase in illness. Crazy. Summary.
As a microbiologist, I encounter new species of microorganisms. I actually specialize in studying fungi, specifically the types that harm humans. I research how a potentially harmful fungus performs some basic life functions. Understanding how a fungus uses energy, reproduces, regulates itself, and responds to stimuli can help microbiologists like me develop ways to treat people infected with it. All living things are different, but whether they are unicellular or multicellular, they share certain characteristics and perform basic functions of life. For example, they're all made of one or more cells, they show internal organization, and they have a definite boundary. Studying how organisms obtain nutrition and energy, as well as how they grow, reproduce, and respond to stimuli, helps life scientists learn a lot about different organisms. Exploring connections between these organisms also helps life scientists learn a little more about the world and its inhabitants every day.
Congratulations, you have completed the tutorial Cells, the Building Blocks of Life. Now, please move on to completing your guided notes. And remember, you can prevent forest fires.